Okay. Thank you for
Great.
that reminder. Please, over to you.
Thank you so much. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Martha, for that very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to interact with everyone at the end of this. And also, thank you to UbuntuNet for inviting ORCID to be a part of the OPAR Open Science webinar series. So, yeah, during this session, I'd just like us to explore something that sits very quietly in the background of research, but has an enormous impact on whether research is actually found, connected, and trusted. So we will be talking about ORCID, but this is also a conversation about research infrastructure and about how repositories across Africa can help to strengthen the visibility and impact of African scholarship. So I just really hope that by the end of today's session, you'll see ORCID not just as an identifier for researchers, but also as one of the building blocks of a connected research ecosystem. So what exactly is ORCID? So the letters ORCID actually stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID and provides three main services. The first one is the ORCID ID, which is a unique persistent identifier, which is free of charge to individual researchers. I will talk a bit more about PIDs. But also the second thing is that we provide an ORCID record, which is a digital CV or a profile that is connected to the ORCID ID. And this includes different metadata like employment, education, funding, and so on. And then third, we have the ORCID APIs, which are tools that let systems connect and exchange trusted information. So yeah, I'd like for you to think of ORCID as a central place for research information that is shared across research systems. And I just really love this diagram because it changes how we think about ORCID. I think of it more as a transport hub. Imagine an airport, for example. So flights arrive from all over the world and passengers change planes and then they continue to their next destination. And ORCID works in much the same way. So universities will come and they'll contribute affiliation information, publishers will contribute publications, funders will contribute grant information, and then repositories contribute research outputs. So all of that trusted information comes together in one place and can then flow, obviously with the researcher's permission, to the other systems that they use. And that means that the researcher doesn't have to keep on proving who they are every single time that they interact with another platform. And that saves time for everyone. So we've talked about what ORCID is, but an equally important question is how widely is it actually being used? Because infrastructure only becomes valuable when the community actually adopts it. So this slide isn't about memorizing numbers, so I won't read them all out. Instead, I want you to notice the scale. So today there are more than 11 million researchers with ORCID IDs. Thousands of universities, publishers, funders, and repositories are connected to the ORCID registry, and over 7,000 scholarly systems integrate with ORCID in some way. So for repository managers, this is important because every new integration doesn't just benefit one institution. But what it does is that it strengthens the entire research ecosystem by making metadata more connected, reusable, and discoverable. So what that tells us is that ORCID is no longer just a researcher profile. It has become shared infrastructure that allows information to move reliably between systems. So we can now move on to the African visibility gap. I think this is what brings everything together. So as we get into the nitty-gritties of today's session, I just have one simple question. If incredible research is produced, but the global research ecosystem struggles to discover it, does it receive the impact that it deserves? We all know that Africa is home to almost one-fifth of the world's population, contributes to only a small fraction of global scholarly output. So part of that is about research capacity, but another part of it is also about visibility. Too much valuable African research remains disconnected across institutional repositories, publisher platforms, funding systems, as well as researcher profiles. So today's conversation is about how we're going to fix that. So how do we close this visibility gap? The answer isn't just one piece of software or one repository. It isn't even ORCID by itself, actually. It's about creating connections between systems so that research can move seamlessly across the scholarly ecosystem. Persistent identifiers make those connections possible. And once you understand how they work, Sorry about that. Once you understand how they work, you'll start seeing them everywhere in research. So let's spend a few minutes looking at what persistent identifiers actually are and why they've become such an important part of open science. And we'll start with the basics.
Sorry, Lombe.
Yes.
I have a comment in there where one is asking for you to slow down a bit.
Okay,
Yes.
sure.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, so as I was saying, we will start with the basics. So persistent identifiers, or PIDs, sound like quite a technical term, but the idea of PIDs is actually very simple. So a PID is a permanent way of identifying something. And that something can be maybe a researcher, it could be an article, it could be a data set or a grant or even a piece of software. And there are three characteristics that make a PID valuable. The first one is that it's persistent. So it doesn't just disappear when systems change or when websites move. Secondly, it's globally unique. So one identifier refers to one thing and one thing only. The third thing is that it's resolvable. So both people and machines can use it to find trusted information about that object. And that's what makes PIDs such an important foundation for open science. So now that we've talked about what a PID is, we need to know, why do they matter so much? I'd like for you to think about how often researchers encounter confusion. Sometimes you find that two researchers have the same name, or someone changes their surname, maybe because of marriage or different reasons, and we'll talk about those a bit later. Um, but also we realize that PIDs solve those problems because they remove the ambiguity from all of this, and they allow us to say, this is exactly the researcher that I was talking about, or this is exactly the publication that I was referring to. But also they do much more than that. They also make automation possible. So once systems recognize the same identifier, they don't need humans to keep on typing that same information over and over again. So you enter the information once, but you reuse it often as you need to. So that saves time, and it also reduces mistakes because, sometimes when you get tired of entering the same information over and over again, it is possible to make mistakes because we're human, right? But also, most importantly, it allows research to move much more smoothly across different systems. And that's the real power of persistent identifiers. So they connect information that would otherwise remain isolated in different systems. So one of my favorite ways of thinking about PIDs is that they identify people, places, and things. So ORCID, what I'm talking about now, identifies people. ROAR identifies organizations. DOIs identify research outputs. And now we also include other types of PIDs. Like for grants, we have Crossref grant IDs. I know Crossref presented last week. Please do watch that recording if you missed the talk. And then for research activities, we have RAID. But what each of these identifier answers is a different question. It answers who did the work, where was this work done, what was produced, who funded it. There are all these questions that are linked to it. But when all those identifiers work together, we begin building a much richer picture of research. And once all of these identifiers exist, the next step is to connect them together. And that brings me to the PID graph. So you don't need to worry about memorizing all these connections, but the important thing to understand is the idea under all of this. So just imagine every identifier as a dot. So on their own, they're very useful for sure. But once those dots begin connecting to one another, they then become a network. So suddenly we can then answer much richer questions like which researcher specifically received this grant, or which dataset supported this particular publication, or which institution produced this research. All these different questions can then have an answer based on how they're connected with this PID graph. So that's also why repositories are so important. They don't just store research, but they become one of the places where these connections are then created. Um, so overall, the goal is an integrated research data ecosystem. And sometimes we hear the word integration, and if you're like me and I'm not very tech savvy, and immediately I hear the word integration, I would immediately think of software development. But integration isn't really about technology, if you think about it. It's more about reducing friction. And for researchers, this means spending less time filling in forms and actually doing research, which is, what researchers want to do. For institutions, it means having more accurate information and better reporting. If you look at the wider research community, it means trusted information can then move between systems automatically. And that's why ORCID asks researchers to authenticate themselves instead of simply typing an identifier into a box. So once identity has been confirmed, trusted information can then flow much more confidently between different systems. Um, so if repositories are one of the places where these connections are created, what does a good ORCID integration actually look like? The good news is that it's much simpler than many people expect. So instead of talking about technology, I'd like to think of this as, I'd like us to focus on one imaginary researcher. So we'll call this researcher Chikondi, right? And Chikondi has just completed her PhD at the University of Malawi. And she's published her very first journal article, and now she deposits it into her institutional repository. So the repository asks her to sign in with ORCID, not because it wants another password, but because it wants to know with certainty that she is the owner of that particular ORCID ID. And once that's done, something powerful happens. It now means that the repository already knows who she is. Her ORCID record already knows about her. Her publication now includes an authenticated ORCID ID. And when other systems then harvest that metadata, they immediately know exactly who produced that work. So Chikondi only entered her information once, but that single action can now benefit publishers, funders, discovery services, as well as her own university. And that's the beauty of interoperability. It's just one action, but with many benefits for many different systems. Um, and most importantly, having the researcher at the heart of all of this. So if you're a responsible, no, if you're responsible for a repository, what does success actually look like for you? So you don't need to memorize this, but I'd like you to remember four simple ideas about this. First, always collect authenticated ORCID IDs whenever possible. And then secondly, don't treat the ORCID ID as a node that is tucked away somewhere in the system. You have to make sure that it is a part of the metadata that has traveled with the research output. Also, just a reminder that authentication gives everyone confidence that the identifier really belongs to that particular researcher. Third, reuse trusted information whenever you can. Because if ORCID already knows where someone works or what they've published, you don't have to make them type it all over again every time. And finally, remember that integration is a two-way relationship. So repositories shouldn't just read information from ORCID, they should also contribute trusted information back to ORCID, definitely with the researcher's permission. So when all of those four things happen, repositories become much more than storage platforms. They become active participants in a connected research ecosystem. So you might be wondering what this actually looks like in real repository platforms. So I have two examples, and the first one is DSpace, which is one of the most widely used repository platforms in the world, including here in Africa. And what I want you to notice isn't every feature, but it's that DSpace has built these ORCID best practices directly into the platform. So researchers can then authenticate their ORCID ID, and then repositories can then capture trusted metadata. And with permission, validated information can even be written back to ORCID records. So in other words, many of these best practices are already available, and institutions don't have to start from scratch when they're trying to implement these best practices. So this slide simply shows that these integrations are already being used in practice, and thousands of researchers have connected their ORCID IDs, and affiliations have been added. Also, publications are flowing directly between DSpace and ORCID. And this is encouraging because it shows that this isn't theoretical. Institutions around the world are already benefiting from these integrations. Another one is ePrints, and ePrints also takes a very similar approach. And like DSpace, it allows repositories to collect authenticated ORCID IDs and to connect research outputs back to researchers. The exact functionality of this differs slightly between platforms, but the underlying principle is exactly the same. Identify researchers correctly, and then capture that trusted metadata, and finally share that trusted information across the research ecosystem. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through these screenshots because they're really intended to show the workflow that we've just discussed. Um, and so here we see an authenticated researcher depositing their work. This is just an example that you can use. And then here we see that the authenticated ORCID ID is added to the repository entry. And then after that, we see that the repository will write that validated publication back to the ORCID record. And you notice the trust marker showing where that information came from. By trust marker, we'll talk about that a bit later, but it's the little green tick. So that's showing where the information is coming from. And that's important because anyone who's viewing the ORCID record can immediately see that this wasn't simply typed in by the researcher themselves. We do know that people do lie about certain things that they've done. But this is telling us that it was contributed by a trusted organization. So this shows the complete journey from repository to trusted scholarly infrastructure. I hope I'm not going too fast. Please do let me know if I do that again. And now we'll talk a bit about ORCID's distributed trust model. We believe that validation is only a part of the solution, but what is actually helpful and appropriate for our use case? So ORCID is not trying to replace a passport or a national identity card, but in research, we're not usually interested in someone's physical identity, but what we really need is confidence in their scholarly identity. So can a university confirm that that's where they work, or can a publisher confirm that that's the person who wrote a specific article? Or can a funder confirm that they received this grant? Those are the important questions that we have. So those scholarly connections are much more valuable to research than someone's home address or their passport number, which is also not something that people want to share with random people. And so this slide compares those two ideas. We know that traditional identity documents are designed for legal purposes. Maybe you need to sue a researcher or, for whatever reason. ORCID is designed for scholarly communication. Our goal isn't to identify citizens, but it's to identify researchers and to connect them confidently with their research contributions. And researchers can add a wide range of information to the ORCID records themselves, as you can see on this slide. And so that's already valuable. But ORCID then becomes even more powerful when trusted organizations contribute that same information because it adds another layer of confidence. And this is really the heart of ORCID's trust model. Researchers don't carry the whole responsibility themselves. But what we do see is that universities are then able to validate affiliations, while publishers can validate publications and funders validate grants, just like I mentioned earlier. So each organization is contributing the information that it knows best, which is important for all of this to work well. So together, those contributions create a much richer and a more trustworthy scholarly record. ORCID also makes these trust markers easy to see. So rather than searching through an entire record, you can just quickly identify which information has been contributed by trusted organizations and which ones are self-asserted works. So that basically means in a situation where the researcher put in that information on their own. And one of the reasons that trust matters so much today is because the scholarly community is facing increasing concerns around research integrity. And I'm very happy to say that ORCID isn't the complete solution. This is something that needs to, it's a process that needs to come together from different players. But what I will say is that authenticated identifiers and trusted organizational data make it much harder for inaccurate or fabricated information to spread through research systems. And that's why ORCID works with publishers, institutions, and funders to increase the amount of validated information that's available. And this brings us back to the role of institutions. Research integrity isn't something that one organization can solve alone. Every university, repository, publisher, funder, all of these contribute one piece of trusted information. And those pieces together then strengthen the whole system. So one important point to remember is that contributing trusted information back to ORCID records is a benefit of ORCID membership only. And it's one of the ways that institutions actively strengthen both their researchers' records as well as the wider scholarly community. And earlier in the presentation, I described ORCID as a hub rather than simply a profile. So all these different players, the researcher, the university, the repository, and so on, all of these contribute that information. And then ORCID becomes the place where all of those trusted connections come together. And this isn't, the important thing here isn't that everything is sitting inside ORCID. The important part is that trusted information can then flow back out to all the different systems that researchers interact with every day. And that is how we reduce the duplicate data entry while improving the quality of metadata across the research ecosystem. But what does the overall ORCID registry actually look like when all this information starts coming together? Just imagine for a moment that this little beaker or container represents the ORCID registry. And inside it is information about millions of researchers and all this other information. And so in the early years of ORCID, before we came up with this, most of this information was added directly by the researchers themselves. And that's what is represented by the blue color, the self-asserted works. And there's actually nothing wrong with self-asserted information. But we know that the registry becomes even more valuable when organizations begin contributing validated information as well. So it's like me saying, I'm Lombe, I went to the University of Zambia. Some people might believe me, some might not. But if the University of Zambia asserts this information on my record, so now if you look at my ORCID ID, it will say that Lombe said she went to the University of Zambia, but the University of Zambia has confirmed that Lombe went there. So that's the importance of the these different sources of information. And so, over time, we're seeing more trusted organizations contributing this information. And as that happens more and more, you can imagine that the registry gradually changes color from blue for the self-asserted works to green, which is showing the trusted works. And also, this is not because researchers lose ownership of their records. They actually remain in control throughout this process. But because more of this information has now been validated by trusted organizations, this means, this changes completely. And so every organization that integrates with ORCID helps to move us one step further towards that vision. And every new integration strengthens the ecosystem for everyone. And this is where we want it to be ultimately. It's a future where most of the information that is flowing through scholarly systems comes from trusted organizations rather than manual data entry. And once we have all these trusted information coming in, and also that researchers still control what appears in their record. At the end of the day, we have a very robust system where we know for sure that this information is correct and it's accurate. And also that's how we improve confidence in research information without creating extra work for researchers. So if that's what the vision is, what does it actually mean for universities and research institutions? This can be downloaded afterwards, but just to summarize, it means better attribution. A university can say with confidence that this is the amount of research that came out of this university. Even after those researchers leave, it's still something that can be attributed to the university. But this also means better visibility, better reporting, less manual administration, more confidence in your institutional data. And, when researchers spend less time entering information repeatedly, they then spend more time doing research. And that's a benefit for researchers, but it is also a benefit for the institutions themselves. And so this will then bring me back to how we're bridging this visibility gap. Earlier, I spoke about the visibility gap that's facing African research. And by now, I hope that it's clear that this isn't just about publishing more research, but it's about making sure that that research can be found, it can be connected, and also correctly attributed to the person who did it. So when repositories, institutions, and researchers all use trusted identifiers like ORCID, what they do is that they create richer metadata that makes research easier to discover and also to be reused. So that's an important step towards ensuring that African scholarship receives the visibility that it deserves. So in other words, better infrastructure helps to create better visibility overall. And so naturally, one question institutions often ask is, but is this going to improve our global rankings, right? And the short answer is that ORCID isn't a shortcut to higher rankings. So university rankings depend on many factors, including research quality, citations, and reputation. So ORCID doesn't change that. But what it does is ensure that your researchers, publications, and institutional affiliations are accurately connected and discoverable. And that means that your university is more likely to receive proper recognition for the work that it is already doing. So while ORCID doesn't improve rankings directly, it does strengthen the research infrastructure that supports visibility, recognition, and long-term impact. So yeah, of course, institutions aren't the only ones who benefit. Individual researchers also benefit from this. And we spent a lot of time looking at ORCID from an institutional perspective, but I'd just like us to also look at it through the eyes of a researcher. I mentioned this earlier, but ORCID solves name ambiguity. And this slide just gives an example of something that actually happened with an author who was complaining that he was the 38th author. And, the response was, wow, that sucks. And he said, I hadn't finished. I'm the 38th author called Wang. And this actually was not an exaggeration. This is an actual screenshot. So all these people named Wang had actually contributed to this paper. So with ORCID, it's then possible for you to say that this specific Wang contributed to this paper. And also we'll ask ourselves, what's in a name, right? And most names are not unique. Tembo for sure in Zambia is a very, very common name. And so many people can have the same name or, similar names. And names also can change throughout your career, maybe because of marriage, or other circumstances. People change their names for many different reasons. Also, there are different alphabets. And there are a few examples up there on the screen. And yes, also some people have many names. So you find that on some papers, not all that, like some of the names are included, maybe one initial is left out. There are different problems that can come with different naming conventions. This is actually an example of that with KB Romdan. On some of the papers, his name is misspelled, but it's still the same person. So with his ORCID record, all these articles are still connected to his ORCID ID because that information was entered each time he had to do a different article. ORCID also facilitates automation and reuse with other PIDs. And you'll see some place PIDs there, thing PIDs, as well as people PIDs. Researchers are also in full control of their ORCID records. I keep saying this, but it's very important that it's clear that this is something that is retained by the researcher. So yeah, they're able to set the visibility for each line item in their ORCID profile from the three options that are shown on the right. So it could be green for everyone to see. It could be set to yellow so that only the trusted parties can see that particular item. And then red is only me. So then in that case, only the researcher would be able to see what is on their ORCID record. This is another one that this is really just a summary, and I will share these slides so you'll be able to download this handout so you can share or read it on your own for more understanding. So one question that institutions often ask is, how do we know whether a system has implemented ORCID well? And that is where we bring in the ORCID certified service providers, or CSPs in short. So many of our members use systems that already have ORCID functionality built in, rather than developing their own integrations. And CSPs then make it quicker and easier for organizations to adopt ORCID and also to start contributing trusted information through their existing workflows. So the CSP program recognizes systems that meet ORCID's best practice standards, helping to ensure that researchers have a consistent, high-quality experience wherever they interact with ORCID. And as of today, we have 5 certified workflows, making it easier for institutions to choose trusted solutions with confidence. So while technology enables these integrations, collaboration is what actually helps them to grow. And that is where ORCID's regional consortium comes in. So ORCID's impact is strengthened through regional consortia, where groups of organizations work together to support ORCID adoption. And rather than each institution working independently, consortia then provide shared experience, training, and community support. And then this makes it easier, also more affordable, to implement ORCID and also to share good practices. So this collaborative approach helps institutions to adopt ORCID more efficiently while also building stronger research infrastructure across the region. And today, that collaborative model is already active in many parts of the world. And this map shows the growing global network of ORCID consortia. And so each consortium supports its local community while also contributing to the wider ORCID network. And so as ORCID adoption continues to grow across Africa, regional collaboration will play an increasingly important role in strengthening our research ecosystem. And of course, we do recognize that institutions around the world have different levels of resources. And that is why ORCID created the Global Participation Program. Yeah, so this is basically an initiative which takes on a two-pronged approach to increasing adoption across the Global South, or basically in low and lower middle income countries, as according to the World Bank. So the program has two main components, and the first one is the Membership Equity Program, and the second one is the Global Participation Fund. So together, these initiatives help to ensure that organizations can participate in the global research ecosystem, regardless of their resources. And just to explain these in a bit more detail, the MEP, or the Membership Equity Program, offers discounted consortium membership. So this is only for the consortium approach. And so if if the consortium is based in a low income country, they do get an 80% discount. And for lower middle income countries, they get a 50% discount. And then the second part is the Global Participation Fund, which which provides grants to support community building, as well as technical integrations that expand ORCID adoption in the Global South. So together, these initiatives help to ensure that that organizations can participate in the global research ecosystem, regardless of their resources. So I'll just like to end this session with the message, just especially relevant to today's audience, which I'm guessing is people coming from African institutions. Africa is producing outstanding research, but way too often that research isn't visible or as well connected as it could be. So by adopting trusted research infrastructure like ORCID, institutions can then improve the visibility, discoverability, and recognition of their researchers, and also for their research outputs. So combined with initiatives like the Global Participation Program, we then have an opportunity to build a more connected and equitable research ecosystem across the continent. And I strongly believe that Africa has enormous research potential. And by working together through repositories, institutions, as well as ORCID, we can then help to ensure that that Africa's potential is fully recognized around the world. So thank you once again for your time and your attention, and I'm more than happy to take questions now. Over to you, Martha.
Thank you so much, Lombe. That was very insightful. I'm sure my audience also found that insightful as well. Please feel free to post any questions in the chat if you have, or you can just unmute yourself and ask Lombe any questions that you have on the presentation. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat. Is there anyone who has a question? Okay, I see some questions in the chat. Let me just.
Martha, I actually see a question here.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so it says, ORCID, okay, I'm not sure what.
It appears blank on my end.
Okay, but it's in the chat. It says ORCID, I'm guessing ORCID does not address two email IDs of the same author. Suppose I join one university and then change to another university? That's a great question. I hope I've understood it correctly. But so to address that, you can connect as many email addresses as you have used to your ORCID profile. So there's a section on your ORCID profile that allows you to then enter the email addresses for your previous organization, for your current one. And so you don't need to worry that because you've left one organization, you need to open another ORCID ID. The same ORCID ID follows you throughout your career. So wherever you go, you will still be able to say, I'm coming from this university and this is my work. All of that information is still linked to your ORCID ID and your ORCID profile. I hope that's clear, but if I'm not clear, please do let me know.
Thank you so much for taking that, Lombe. Is there anyone else with a question? You are welcome to unmute yourself, or you can just post it in the chat if you're more comfortable with that.
I see another question, Martha. So someone says, does changing my email also change my audience visibility? No. So for the visibility of, the visibility can be for each line item in your ORCID profile. So let's say you did a bit of research from. Wow. You did, maybe I'll use myself as an example. So if I did my first degree at University of Zambia, but I don't want that to show, whether I change my email address, that's it's not linked to what is happening um on the ORCID profile. So there you are the one who's setting what you want people to see. So for that line item that says University of Zambia, and like I studied a specific program, I can hide that particular line item, and it doesn't matter how many times I add different emails, whatever information I'm adding, it's still about me and what I want to be shown to the rest of the world. Yeah, so this was for this question from Mr. Edgar.
Okay. Okay, I see Simon there. You say we don't understand. May you kindly perhaps elaborate more? Thank you so much for that. This recording will be shared on our UbuntuNet TV platform on YouTube. So you're welcome to revisit it because Lombi did take some time to go through more on ORCID. Is that okay, Lombe, or you want to address that as
I
well?
I mean, I did talk about it quite a bit in the beginning, so maybe they could watch the presentation from the beginning.
Yeah.
If it's still
Okay.
not clear, my contact details are on the front.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I did quite a big job of explaining that.
Yeah. No, you did. Thank you so much. There's a question there. It says, which version of Dispatch supports ORCID integration?
Which version of DSpace supports ORCID integration? So even up to the latest one, I know there's been a bit of confusion within the DSpace community about the transition and the connection between DSpace and DSpace Chris, but DSpace is one of our certified service providers. So all the versions as up to the latest one supports ORCID integration. Thank you, Wesley, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Wesley has shared some information there about that people
Yeah.
can use to start to learn about ORCID.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. There's a question there. It says that is each country supposed to have its own consortium, or does each NREN? I think
That's
you are. Sorry.
that's a good question, actually. So no, I should have elaborated a little bit more on the slide about the consortia. We do have national consortia, but we also have regional consortia. And so for regional consortia, these ones cover more than one country. So in Africa, we don't have a regional consortium yet, but it's something that is still it's something that we're trying to work on because we realize that for Africa, we might need um, a bigger an organization that is able to handle countries that are outside of of where they're registered. So that's something we're currently working on. But we will definitely share once we have a regional consortium. But yeah, some countries do have national consortia. Um, yeah, that's what we have at the moment.
Thank you so much for that question, Henry. Do we have more questions? Please
I
kindly. Oh, you see
sorry.
one.
Yes. Edgar once again mentioned at Infectious Diseases Institute Makerere, Uganda. He serves 275 medical researchers, and many of them have no ORCID accounts. May you please organize a training for us and educate us on the uses of ORCID for we produce impactful research to African continent. So the best way I can assist here is to direct you to Renew. So Renew is our consortium lead in Uganda, and they're actually Makerere, the Infectious Diseases Institute is a member of the consortium. So if you could speak to Renew, they would be more than happy to do that to do that training. So the ORCID team is pretty small. So usually what we do is we work with our partners and our consortium leads to handle these trainings at that level. But other than that, we do have a lot of information on our website, and we have videos for videos that can help to give more context. And I think also the link that Wesley had shared has many videos that explain ORCID in great detail.
All right, thank you so much. We have about 7 minutes to go. If anyone still has a question for Lombe, please, you may unmute yourself or you can share it in the chat. And like I said earlier, this recording will be made available on our YouTube channel. I've shared the link in the chat, but you are also welcome to sign up so that you get more updates on upcoming webinars. I will share just now links to the Ubuntu Net Alliance newsletter, that's Nuance. So you're free to subscribe so that you can keep up with the work that's happening across the different national research and education networks.
Martha, I'm not sure. I've just realized that Lillian had sent a question asking about if whether we're talking about already existing or new ones. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear earlier. So we do have, at the moment, we have three national consortia in Africa. We have one thriving consortia in South Africa. Uganda is also doing really well. And we also have a consortium in Nigeria. And then we have a regional one, but that one is for the Arab states. It's led by ASREN. So those are the ones that are currently existing, but there are talks for a regional one. I hope that's helpful. But yes, so we do have some existing ones, but we're working on a few more national and regional consortia.
All right, wonderful. Thanks so much for elaborating more on that. Okay. I've shared a link as well where you may register for our upcoming webinar. That's going to be on building trusted and connected. Oh, that's the one we had last time. But we'll keep having more webinars as we go. So just stay tuned to our LinkedIn page. And also, you're welcome to subscribe to Nuance, like I said. All right, it looks like we do not have more questions, Lombe. Do you have any last words for the audience?
Well, I would just say I'm not sure how many repository managers are on the call, but I would say please do start reviewing how your repository is currently collecting ORCID IDs. And if you're also only asking researchers to type in their ORCID IDs, please explore how you can move to authenticated ORCID integration because it does make the whole ecosystem so much richer. It's a very small change, but it can significantly improve the quality and the trustworthiness of your metadata. And if there are researchers on the call and you don't have an ORCID ID, please do sign up. It takes less than 5 minutes and it's a game changer. I'm not just saying this because I work for ORCID, but I believe in the I believe in PIDs and all the great work that they do together. So yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's great. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you everyone for participating today. Like I said, we'll be having more of these, so please do stay tuned. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Martha.
Bye bye.